Management Committee, along with our Housing, Community, and Economic Development as well. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, the Honorable Councilmembers Jose Rizar and Councilmember Jack Rice, our Chair for our Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee, the Honorable Councilmember Herb Wesson, and our Council President, Eric Garcetti. I'm not sure we anticipate Councilmember Tony Carlos or John Perry, but we assume they're on their way down here. What we're going to try to do is move this agenda in such a way where I'm going to go over the plum agenda items that are consent and are being rescheduled. So those of you that are here for those items will know what our actions will be if we do get consent. Then we'll come back. I'll do the first two items of the Housing Joint Committee, and Councilmember Wesson will be finishing up with 3 and 4. And we can try and move this as quick as possible. So that being said, we do have cards on items number 1. Number 2, a nice healthy stack from Mr. Wesson for number 3. Number 4. And we jump all the way to number 10. 1 card on 5. Oh, there it is. 1 card on 5. We jump to number 10. And we have cards on number 12. And then public comment cards. So that being said, if we go to item 6, we can move that on consent, seeing no cards on 6. On 7, we can move on consent. 8 and 9 on consent. We have a card on item number 10. Number 11 on consent. We do have cards on item 12. On 13A, we'll continue in plum till July 15th, and in council, July 29th. The same holds for 13B. Items 14 and 15, we won't have any reports today. So, have a second on those consent items? Second, an exciting second. And we have a yes on, it's unanimous on all the consents. We got the double eyebrows going up, that means yes. So, that being said, we can move to item number 1. And if we can have the Housing Department to come forward and give us their report. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Councilman. I'm here from the Hacamortize with the Los Angeles Housing Department. And on item 1 of the implementation of the tenant relocation ordinance, the housing, as you all recall, this council adopted a tenant relocation ordinance on April 11th of last year. And subsequently, on October 23rd of last year, we executed an agreement with the relocation services contractor. We executed an agreement with the relocation services contractor, and we instituted a demolition monitoring program, and the relocation contractor has been going out there ever since to every case which requires relocation.
I'm going to ask you to pause for a second.
Sure.
We have folks in the room that are having conversations. If you can please take them outside. it is hard to hear. The acoustics aren't the best. So we appreciate your cooperation. So allow the speaker to be heard. So please take your conversations outside. Thank you. Please proceed. And just speak closer to the mic so we can hear you better.
I apologize. Is that better?
Yes,
Thank
better.
you. So for every case in which a relocation is required, an owner comes to the housing department and files a relocation services application, pays the required administrative and contractor fees, and the case is then referred to the contractor, who goes out and meets with the tenants, issues a relocation payment determination, and then provides tenants with services and assistance in relocating from those premises. What you have here in the report that's before you is a collation of various statistics that both have to do with the difference in terms of withdrawals of units from the rental market for different categories in the year before the implementation of the ordinance and the year subsequent, and also the stats that we have through the end of March of this year for the services provided by the relocation services contractor to various affected tenants.
Okay. Any questions for... Any questions? And we take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that we had 30 tenants that have been relocated, and could we get a report back just on what their experience is like so that we can have a little bit of that feedback? It doesn't have to be a detailed one, but one that gives us some idea of that. Is that doable?
Certainly, I can tell you, Councilman, what we have gotten, and we are working currently to augment the ability of us to get further additional information from tenants, is that we provide them with customer satisfaction surveys, and as the report shows, we have about 15 of 182 surveys that were mailed that have been returned. So we are now looking at ways to send those at different times to see if there's a way that we can increase the feedback we get.
How is it being done? Is it being done by mail, by phone?
By mail.
English, Spanish?
Right,
other
by
languages?
mail and also in English and Spanish. Okay. And so what we're going to do is to see if there's any way that we can work to get better results and returns from those.
Yeah, that would be helpful, obviously.
Sure.
Any other questions for our staff?
This is on item number 1?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically we've seen an overall a decrease of the loss of available rental units, correct?
Correct. As the statistics show, Councilman, overall in different categories, we have somewhere in around 40% as a general average of a decrease in units that have been withdrawn from the rental market for the year prior compared to the year after the adoption of the tenant relocation ordinance. Of course, we all are aware of the fact that we've also gone through the last year an extreme credit crunch and a downturn in the housing market, and so there's many factors that enter into that picture, but definitely the statistics show about at least a 40% decline.
That's interesting to note. So although we haven't seen we're going towards our goal, we're not quite sure what was the cause of getting towards our goal. You're right, the credit crunch, other factors, people not moving towards converting some of these units. So that's good for our overall rental market, I believe. And secondly, we haven't seen as many appeals as we expected. So it sounds like overall, most of our bases were covered in terms of problematic areas that we may have missed because there's not as many appeals. And what do you attribute that to? Or is
Councilman, when you refer to appeals, are you referring to appeals from tenants in the land use appeals that you hear at the Plum Committee?
Yes.
Well, I think it would be, I don't really know with regards to each specific case, but certainly when the council adopted the new relocation amounts, council mitigated the impact of displacement on tenants to a far greater extent than existed prior to the changes in the relocation amounts, and that may have had something to do with the types of appeals that you receive.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go through public comment, and then if we have any questions,
Thank you,
come
Councilman.
back. Thank you. We have 2 cards on this item, Lori Gross and then John Welsh. If you can keep an eye on the clock, you have 2 minutes. So give us your name and address, and we'll go from there.
Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. The report indicates that Ellis evictions are down and that's only because the market has plummeted. We still need this council to proceed with its agreement to explore ways to further restrict condo conversions and demolitions. In fact, now is the time to do it, when the market is slow. We also oppose denying tenants who have lived in their units 3 years or less lower amounts. We are concerned that this issue of such controversy and debate was extended last Friday without any real notice or debate. The report indicates that 10,000 evictions have occurred. Of these 10,000 households lucky enough to find themselves in LA with new housing, some of them can find themselves being evicted once again and facing the trauma of displacement. But to add injury to insult, after incurring this hardship and expense of moving, they'd be receiving the lower amounts because they're in their units 3 years or less because they've already been evicted. In regards to the relocation specialist data, there clearly, as you indicated, there's not really enough data here to make an adequate evaluation of performance. We really need to know how many tenants found new housing through the relocation specialist. What is the rent differential between what the tenant was paying before and is now paying? How many of these tenants were provided the transportation they're supposed to be getting, ambulance, and things like that? And I think it's really important for the city to know that, to be able to evaluate and also see how tenants are being impacted by being displaced due to these evictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. With 10 seconds to spare, that's great. John Walsh?
John Walsh, Yucca Street, one of the 10,000 next year pre-relocated. I'm a member of the pre-relocated. I'd like to thank Mr. Gross for killing Proposition 98, for his brilliance in the campaign that destroyed rent control, that saved rent control. It is necessary to destroy the village in order to save it. That's what you're doing in my neighborhood. On Gower Street, where Grandma Gomez lives, and they were about to take her out 3 years ago until I got her and her son, who had lived there for 15 years. She was 78 then, that was 3 years ago. Grandma Gomez had a sign saying, please, Antonio Villaraigosa, don't evict us. When that appeared on the front page of the Hollywood Independent, suddenly they pulled back. They pulled back. Now you're trying to take over the property. It's a beautifully renovated by the church and then sold by the church to the CRA, 24 units on Gower Street, just north of Hollywood Boulevard. I'll take you out there, where they're living now. They're going to be destroyed. These beautiful units, most of them are empty now. Why? They're going to destroy the units to build homeless housing. In one of the largest cities in the world per square mile, you couldn't find any other place to build homeless housing than it with a 24-unit complex where minorities were living. Now I want to tell you, Grandma Gomez is one smart woman. They came to her, this is 3 years ago, we're going to find some place for you. Oh, everything politically correct, everything in Spanish. Oh, a wonderful place near downtown, and you will love it. Now, Grandma Gomez is used to what goes on in dictatorships. She came to John Walsh, she came to our neighborhood group, and she's still living there with her son.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Watch out.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Our last speaker, Noel Weiss.
Council members, good afternoon. With regard to this report, number one, my understanding, at least back last year, Herb was going to hold hearings. You guys were going to hold collective hearings on the question of the follow-up, whether or not there are going to be problems, whether or not we could basically equalize between 1295.2 conversion tenants and demolition tenants. This report was supposed to report back on problems and difficulties before we extended the bifurcated system. The fact that it went under the table and the fact that it wasn't done over the table, I think is a disgrace. Number two, with regard to this report, the report does not detail any recommendations with regard to the bifurcated system at all. That was part of the understanding. Number two, the report indicates, at least on the face of it, that Paragon appears to have been overpaid by at least 50%, based upon the fact that under your own system, they should have only gotten 85,000, but apparently they got 133,000. That indicates that maybe there are some problems. Were they from the bifurcated system? We don't know, because we never had any discussion. Number three, with regard to there were 4 problems on disputes with regard to tenant self-certification. We don't know anything about those either. The report tells you nothing. I don't know how you people can make policy unless you, at least one, give the public a fair opportunity to comment on these things before you act on them, and number two, provide adequate reports from housing, basically mandate that housing do what needs to get done in order to give you the information in order to make the right decisions. Lastly, going forward, I again ask for promises to be kept. We've waited a year. Mr. Wesson made a big deal about the fact that we were going to hold these hearings, and nothing happened. Zero. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Our last speaker, absolute last speaker after this public comment for item number 1 we close is Diane Marti.
Hi, good afternoon. I just simply want to say I am opposed to the proposed change in the relocation fees in any way. I am a displaced person. You've heard about the displaced people. In fact, I am so displaced I had to move out of the city of LA because I could find nothing affordable. I did all the right procedures. I wrote to LAHD. I did everything within the protocol, within the law, and I still am displaced. And I just hate to see this keep happening. The people are getting locked out of their homes. There are perfectly good buildings standing empty, my former apartment building being one of them. I am afraid if you open the door a little bit, with some exception for some landlords, that door then becomes a big giant crater and the people fall in. And I am opposed to the relocation fees being changed, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the Housing Department to come forward? Just the last set of instructions. I'd like to ask the Housing Department to report back with recommendations on how to improve the city's enforcement when tenants, when they're being paid, particularly where the owners obtain clearance on demolition permits from the Housing Department when they are depositing funds into an escrow account. Evidently, we've had cases in my district where the fund is put into the escrow account, yet when the tenant needed to have them released, they weren't, and he had to file a complaint, and then it was finally released. And this is an individual who had the capacity to follow up and be aggressive to figure out what happened. There are many tenants who might not know they have that option, so I want to see how we can improve that particular procedure. In terms of trying to get to a place where the different departments are working together, we can have the Housing Department, Department of Building and Safety and Planning, in a coordinated way, formulate procedures, information templates, and application information, submittal packets that advise and emphasize applicant owners of compliance with tenant relocation payment requirements, whether the RSO or non-RSO units. And I'll be a little bit clearer in writing, but that's the gist of that instruction. Again, is trying to understand what the left hand and right hand are doing and how we're tracking that data and improve our ability to serve our constituents. Then lastly, report back to include more detailed information, and it follows on the same wavelength that Councilman Garcetti was setting forward on the cases processed by the city's relocation contractor. I believe it's Paragon. So we can get an accounting specifically on the number of non-RSO properties and units, the array of services that were provided by the contractor, and we can get a tally of services requested for the process cases, so we can understand what is happening to our constituents through the contractor that we've hired.
Certainly, Councilman. Just one clarification also on a comment that was made. In the report back that is before you, it was an amount that was quoted as $133,000, and it was referred to as the amount that was paid to the contractor. Actually, that amount, as it is stated in the report, is the amount that property owners have paid to the housing department in contractor fees. So it's essentially money that we're holding in bank, and then the contractor is compensated based on actual services provided through the city's regular billing procedures.
Right.
And we'll provide you with additional information on
I
our
appreciate that, but getting a picture of who's actually aware of these services and where the gaps lie, and the job we need to do to improve access to these services really is where I'd like to end up, and seeing how we can improve that, given that it's relatively new and the procedures we're learning from our experience.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, colleagues, if we can note and file this with these instructions, then it'll come back to us as a part of the action to the council. Item number 2, that is LHD report relative to protection of tenants from discrimination based on the eligibility for higher relocation payments in response to the motion by Councilmember Smith and Parks.
Yes, Councilman, this particular report back has to do with a request that came about at the end of the adoption of the relocation ordinance, and had to do with potential discrimination which could come about as a result of the new categories which the council adopted, and specifically people who were there for a certain amount of time as in their tenants, and concerns that landlords, unscrupulous landlords may discriminate against a tenant because they're concerned about a potential and pending increase in the relocation amounts. And so what this report back does is that it requests the council to instruct the housing department to work with the city attorney's office to come back to you with an ordinance similar to other ordinances which are included in the municipal code, which provides for civil remedies against people who discriminate against a tenant simply because they are going to qualify for higher relocation amounts. These specific types of ordinances and code sections are found in the public welfare section, and this would simply be an ability for you to instruct us to come back with you with that type of ordinance.
Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, we have 2 cards on this item. Thank you, sir. We have John Walsh and Noel Weiss. Mr. Walsh?
Always a pleasure to speak in front of my 3 favorite city council members, Reyes, Wesson, Wiesman. Stay on the list. Ladies and gentlemen,
There's a drum roll.
you know, the problem is I don't have an evil landlord. I have a landlord that will interpret the law on his side and then go sue me. You know, it isn't like this man is the landlord from hell. He's a landlord from purgatory. He's a human being just like me. I'd like to point out that our neighbor, 40% drop. That's good. But that's like in Iraq. Well, the dead GIs are down 40%. Well, is that good or bad? Well, it's good, but what about the other 60%? And here is that we live in a city where if you are middle class, you can no longer live in the city. My friend who has a job, who makes $22 an hour, who is a black woman, told me that she spent 1 year looking for an apartment. She makes $22 an hour. She works for LAUSD. And she said the best I could find was a 1-bedroom apartment in Gardena in a terrible neighborhood for $900 a month. Now, that wasn't always the case. The year 2000 was the year of the end of the tenant. That's when everything went that's when people like Garcetti, who's supposed to be on our side, with people like you on our side, we might as well surrender. I'm telling you right now, remember, the honest conservative is good. What will kill us is the phony liberal. The phony liberal is the one. Now, we have the Hispanics here and Mr. Wesson, who are doing a good job, but don't trust anyone. Look at their campaign contributions. And I'm telling you right now to finish, that when you tear down the perfectly good building on Gower Street with Grandma Gomez in it, I will have the media for the entire world there. Don't underestimate me.
Welcome back, Mr. Walsh. Noel Weiss?
Gentlemen, we're talking here about before the fact, the discrimination before they even rent. How about what happens when they get discriminated against as they're going out? When they don't get the money that they're entitled to because maybe they say that they're disabled, but the landlord disagrees that they're disabled, and there's a big difference in the price based upon that, and there's no provision at all, zero, within the housing department for adjudication of that. We have landlords getting all kinds of rights relative to taking care of tenant certified income, but if the tenant says, I'm disabled, and the landlord disagrees, there's nothing. They're left hanging out to dry. And this idea that somebody's going to get an affirmative defense, this just simply doesn't cut it, because that assumes that you have to go through a lawsuit in order to protect yourself. If you're talking triple damage plus attorney's fees, let me suggest two things. One, incorporate into your ordinance, since we're going to be studying this some more, incorporate into the ordinance triple damages plus attorney's fees for a willful discrimination by a landlord against a tenant on the grounds of disability under the Ellis Protocol. Number two, require the housing department to accept and receive proofs of service when the notice of intention is filed. Why? Because the landlords file these things first, and maybe a month or two later, then they'll decide to serve the tenants with their notice, because they want to basically try to scare the tenants out with this Ellis thing. And that is a problem. I'm telling you it's a problem. And so that's the second thing that basically you need to do. And the third thing is provide a fair dispute resolution protocol for the tenants right now, like you do for the landlords with regard to this income issue. I think it will help solving a lot of problems, and frankly, I think what you ought to do is frankly provide for some kind of a mediation voluntary, and that probably would solve about 95% of the problems, because you have that in conversions. And lastly, the housing department needs to look into this issue, because their report was totally silent on this issue of the tenants' rights in conversion situations to get their money and terminate the tenancies once the tract map
Thank you, Mr. Weiss.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Reyes.
we have Maria Martinez, then Michelle McKinley, then I believe it's Brian Paul, and that'll close the public hearing for item number 2. So Maria Martinez, please come on up. Then we'll have Michelle McKinley and then Brian Paul. So you want to translate? Do you want to translate? Good afternoon.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Mi nombre es María Martínez.
Un momento, por favor. Do we have a translator in the room?
Okay,
Okay.
¿vas a traducir?
Vivo en el 3761 Woodland. He vivido por más de 8 años y no es justo que por el dueño quiera vivir en la unidad donde yo vivo.
¿Le puede, por favor, darle la oportunidad para interpretar, para traducir? Go ahead.
My name is
Want to speak into the microphone?
Maria Martinez. I live at 3761 Woodland, LA. And I've been living there for more than 8 years, and it's not just that because the owner wants me to leave, just because he wants to live in the unit that I live in, that I have to pay less than the relocation assistance is now.
El dueño quiera vivir en la unidad, vaya a pagar una renta demasiada alta y la reubicación que me dan no es suficiente para pagar la diferencia de una renta alta.
And this relocation assistance would not be sufficient as it is now for me to pay the rent, because the rents are so high.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Michelle McKinley, and then Brian Paul.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a personal account. I'm in favor of adjusting the relocation assistance.
I'm sorry, can you give us your name and your address, please?
Michelle McKinley, 577 Boylston. I heard the word mediation a little while ago for individual accounts, I think would be useful. Our situation is my husband and I bought an income property in Echo Park some years ago, a small apartment building. And it's been a struggle to hang on to it. We've had to make some very necessary repairs and are not able to recoup costs. We've been able to increase rents $55. So we're now losing approximately $1,200 a month over the last 2 years towards this building, and it's painful, and it's heading us towards foreclosure. The other half of the problem is my mother was living with us last fall and through the winter. We live in a 2-bedroom house. We don't have an extra bedroom for her. She's literally living on a bed in our dining room. And she's, since the spring, moved out she's renting a room in somebody's condo now. So there was a gleam of hope this spring that maybe I'd be able to move her into one of the units in our small apartment building. One of the tenants who pays $475 for a large 1-bedroom had moved out, and she'd moved to a retirement community, and that was fantastic and perfect. But she has left her furniture there, and now she's using her now she's using our apartment for a rental unit for the last 5 or 6 months, and she has no intention of moving out. She has no intention of ever moving back in. She has no intention of moving her stuff out anytime soon. So now she's got a big, cheap rental space, and I have nowhere to move my mother into. I'm at a big, serious loss on this building, and my husband and I are trapped in the really ugly catch-22 that's leading us towards foreclosure. And that's our personal situation with this building. So, we do what we can. My husband's literally working 6 days a week. He does any repairs. I do the management myself.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's desperate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Brian Paul.
I'm so pleased that lady came up, and I understand how she feels. I've met so many people that feel cheated by the city, that they invested in this city, they bought homes. Some of the poorest people in our communities bought homes, and the only way they could afford them is to buy 1 to 4 units, and they're owner-occupied. This report that we've seen, it has facts and figures, and none of them talk about the owner-occupied units. There's no figure from Mercedes Marquez about how many of those units are actually owner-occupied units, 1 to 4. And I said last year we should have an exemption for those people. These people have faced foreclosure, they have problems. That lady can't move her own mother into her own home. Can you imagine, all of you well-paid city council members, having to pay relocation to move your own mother into your own home that you've lived in way before this so-called ordinance was brought about? It's almost like a form of extortion for those people. They can't afford it. It's an impossible amount to pay. And I think that the city really needs to look at this. I think it's important also for this committee to look at the illegal units in the city. There are thousands of illegal units that the housing department does nothing about. We're all aware of them. We're all aware of them. And basically the move out there is to, do not register your units with the city at all. Convert your garage, rent it out, and you'll get a free pass. And, the amount of times you can sit in front of this committee and you can tell them, do something about the illegal units. These are the dangerous units. This is where you need to get your SCEP fees and your relocation fees and everything else. I think it's important that we look at the full picture here and stop victimizing people that have invested in the city of LA.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. That concludes the public hearing for item number 2. Any questions for the staff on this item? So we can move to approve the Housing Department's recommendations. Need a second? That'll be the action of this joint committee. Councilmember Wesson.
Okay, if you could read item number 3, please.
Sure, Councilman. Item 3 is an LHD report. It's in response to a motion signed Parks. It's asking an amendment to the RSO as relates to good faith evictions, and LHD has a report on file.
Okay, I think the way we'll do this, if it's okay with the chair, we'll just go straight to public comment.
That's up to you.
Okay, with that said, I'd like to ask Larry Gross to come forward.
Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. In principle, we oppose any cuts in needed relocation assistance to evicted tenants. LAHD did do a good job to respond to council and address a loophole that has resulted in many unjust evictions. But there's an inherent problem and conflicting policy issues at work here. If the intent is to provide a break to the cash-strapped mom-pa landlords, you're still leaving the door wide open for wealthier landlords. If low-income tenants living in units for less than 3 years have to prove their financial status to qualify for higher relocation benefits, then why not require low-income landlords to prove their financial status to qualify for paying lower relocation monies? And here's an example. There's a major high-priced NBA star, not the one you're all thinking of, purchased a fourplex in CD10, Councilmember Wesson. He picked the long-term low-rent tenant, even though he had vacant units, to evict them to move in his mother. So OKR, but questionable given his status. Under this proposal, this multi-million-dollar NBA star could qualify for lower relocation amounts. It's not any easier or cheaper for a tenant to find a new home if the eviction is in good faith or by a mom-pa landlord. With this proposal, the council would be choosing to provide greater protections for low-income landlords over that of low-income tenants. And I don't think that's the message that you want to put out there. There's more specific concerns we have regarding the 50% ownership issue and whether they can qualify, but I don't have time to raise that, and thus we urge you to meet with tenant groups, advocates, and attorneys to discuss this matter further before taking any action. Thank you.
Mr. Gross, you can't leave us. You can't leave us like that. You have to identify. If you don't want to do it publicly, write it on a sheet of paper and let me know who he is.
Let me just say, he's in the newspaper today. So you figure it out.
There's a whole bunch of them in there today. Okay.
There's a lot of trades going on.
That's a cold shot, Larry. Anyway, Shashi Hanuman, please come forward, and after that, Barbara Schultz.
Good afternoon. I'm Shashi Hanuman with Public Counsel Law Center. We are concerned with the current proposal to reduce relocation for a number of reasons. The first has to do with fraud and skewing of incentives. The LAHD report identifies significant monetary incentives to use the owner-occupied eviction instead of the Ellison eviction. And so we strongly support LAHD's recommendations to ensure good faith and prevent fraud in this context. Second, the exemption is still too broad. There's a couple of key issues. The 3-year time period to qualify for this reduced relocation is too short. It appears to have no basis. And even though the purpose of the motion was to help struggling mom and pop owners, these mom and pops don't appear to have to show that they're financially strapped in order to qualify for the relo. Third, the reduced relo is based on second quarter 2006 rent differential. I'm not sure why we're relying on 2006 numbers in 2008 when the rental situation is much worse. And the other final point I want to make is that relo is what the city is relying on to mitigate the environmental impacts of displacement. The relo increase was the only tangible protection that was adopted by council in 2007, although many of us called for stronger protections. Meanwhile, the housing element anticipates development of 113,000 new units, in large part through redevelopment of existing uses. The city is anticipating through its CEQA analysis that this will have a significant impact because substantial numbers of people will be displaced. CEQA requires the city to show it has mitigated this impact, and it attempts to do so by relying heavily on the existing relo scheme. Why are we trying to weaken this scheme now? This is the one mitigation measure we have, and it is the thing that city is relying on right now in its housing element process to get that approved. So that was my final point.
Thank you. And again, like I said, Barbara Schultz and Michael Millman, you're on deck.
Good afternoon. Barbara Schultz from Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. I have no objection to a narrowly tailored... Sorry, let's do this.
Yeah, we're having feedback. I think it's Larry Gross's fault for not telling us
I think it
the
is.
MBA.
I have no objection to a narrowly tailored exemption for a mom-and-pop landlord who absolutely needs the unit and honestly can't financially afford the higher relo amount. In which case you need two things. One, you need good faith evidence about why the unit is needed, and two, good faith evidence that the landlord is low income and can't financially afford to pay. But that's not the motion before you. This, as you heard from Larry, is a mile-wide loophole, the exception that swallows the rule, and could potentially cover over 200,000 units. I appreciate the efforts by LAHD in their report to narrow this, but it still isn't narrow enough. I have a few questions. One, of course, why isn't there a financial requirement? Two, why is the owner required only to own 50%? Is that what a mom and pop is? Three, if you own 4 rental units, are you a mom and pop? Perhaps what we first need is a definition of who it is we're trying to help. What is a mom and pop landlord? And one idea that I haven't heard raised is whether the low-interest loans that the housing department makes available to small landlords could be used to help a truly struggling landlord pay the relo, rather than making a tenant arbitrarily suffer. I think you need to decide whether this is a policy about helping a few struggling mom-and-pop landlords, or is it about helping small businesses evade the relocation ordinance that you passed last year at the expense of thousands of tenants? I urge you to more narrowly tailor an exemption and incorporate the excellent good faith recommendations that are located in the Housing Department report for good faith evictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Millman? And then Jim Clark, you're on deck.
Thank you. Michael Millman, M-I-L-L-M-A-N, 2100 Sawtelle, West Los Angeles. I am a housing provider, and I stand before you because I think there should be an appropriate exemption to the small units. Let's start at the very beginning. I was here last April. We know my good friend Bill Rosendahl came before you, and he wanted you to have a complete moratorium for the District 11. But this council said, no. What we'll do is we will deter the possibility of development by jacking up or increasing the relocation assistance. I understand the logic. I don't fight it. But let's talk about why someone who has an elderly person in their family can't put a caregiver in their apartment. Why you can't move your child who went to the university back into your apartment. Why you can't put your mother-in-law or your father-in-law or your sister or your brother or a manager back in your apartment. After all, it's still America. So I'm not trying to say anything about patriotism. I'm just saying the reason for having the higher fees was to stop runaway development, to stop condo conversions, to stop the craziness with Ellis. Okay, you won. Congratulations. Now let's look at the little people who still want to do a legitimate thing for their own family. I'm willing, with others, to meet with these attorneys, Mr. Gross, Noel Weiss, anybody, sit down over a cup of coffee, let's hammer out something that's reasonable. But litigation is not the answer. I'm sure the councilman who's running for city attorney will tell you that. You and I both know, when I was here last April, I talked to you about the possibility of fraud about a 21-year-old college student and an elderly person coming to rent the same apartment with the same qualifications. They're going to take the younger one because they don't have to pay the additional situation. Litigation and treble damages is not the answer, but I'm willing to go any place and meet. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really glad that he clarified that this was not about patriotism, because I didn't wear my flag pin today. Mr. Clark? And after Mr. Clark is Betsy Handler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jim Clark with the Apartment Association from Greater Los Angeles, representing over 25,000 rental property owners and managers. Thank you for the time. I've read the LHD report regarding the April 11th ordinance and applaud the staff for recognizing that the fees for good faith relocations are way too high. However, there are quite a number of other concerns in their recommendations. First, they recommended lower fees would only apply to mom-and-pop apartment owners who are probably the hardest hit by these outrageous increase in fees. The problem is that the LAHD has defined mom-and-pop operators or operations as being 4 or fewer rental units. Our mom-and-pop operators sometimes have up to 15 units, which is the threshold for state law to require a resident manager. 4 units cannot be used to define mom-and-pop owners. Second, the use of resident manager has been ignored in the LHD proposal. 43% of our members are senior citizens. At some point in their lives, they may have to rely on a resident manager to help them do business. A resident manager also is a hindrance to crime and keeps a building safer. So that to think that a resident manager or caretaker could not be useful in a 12 to 14 unit building is somewhat naive. Fees for resident manager relocations must be addressed in the proposal. Third, prohibiting owners to hold less than 50 or more than 40%, prohibiting owners who hold less than 50% share of their buildings from using an owner occupancy relocation is unacceptable. These days, there are many more purchases being made by groups of 3 or 4 investors, most of them families who want to live in their buildings. The LAHD recommendations would deny these people housing unless they paid the higher fees, a deal breaker, as our realtor friends will tell you. Lastly, I don't care about the stories and what the spin has said over the last year and about how good faith relocations were ultimately included in the April 11th ordinance. We all know that the original intent of the Planning Commission hearings was to find a way to curb the growing number of condominium conversions and building demolitions, which have indeed subsided. Therefore, we recommend that all good faith evictions in any size building be included under the lower fee structure, and that only relocations in the cases of condo conversion and demolition be subject to the higher fees.
Thanks, Jim.
That's the way it should have been. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Betsy Handler, and then on deck will be Phyllis Dougherty.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Doherty, I'm sorry. Go.
My name is Betsy Handler. I'm the Director of Legal Services at Inner City Law Center. I, first of all, want to go on record as agreeing with all my colleagues in the public interest community and their comments. I note that the effort is to reduce relocation fees at a time when the Housing Department acknowledges, as it must, that the market is tighter and rents are higher. I also have a problem with the 50% ownership for quote-unquote mom and pop. But having been a litigator for 31 years, I need to talk about litigation. And the review of best practices on page 8 of the Housing Department's report does set up a scheme for litigation penalties, which I think are not strong enough. 3 times actual damages, which would include rent differentials between the old place and the new. Even if it's $1,000, that's only $3,000. We need a deterrent in there. We either need a higher multiplier or a $1,000 penalty or other kinds of penalties. The problem is, gentlemen, that most of the time we don't know about these cases until well after the fact. The original tenant is gone, scattered to the winds. As Councilmember Reyes said, the tenant who's living, if there's a re-rental, if there's fraud, that person isn't going to cooperate with us because that person doesn't want to get the landlord angry. So it's a very, very difficult hurdle to pass. And I would, as Mr. Gross said, ask that you not take action on this matter until we've had a chance to talk to you individually.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have Phyllis and John. Is John Walsh still here? Then John, you're on deck. Please.
Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Doherty. I own rental property in the 4th, 13th, and 14th district. Anything that I sell, I'm getting out of Los Angeles. I buy in Arizona because over there they don't have rent control. We can be friends with our tenants, and I can adjust my rents. On my individual homes that I rent, if my tenants have a hardship, I can reduce the rent for them, make it easy for them, because I want to keep them. I like them having them there, or I wouldn't have rented to them in the first place. Can't do that on my rent-controlled property. I put it as high as possible, and I keep it there because I have no control over that property. We bought the property for the purpose of having family in it. I can't do that. I have 4 units that are vacant because we need to be able to have them. They'll stay vacant. They're beautiful little units. I would love to rent them out. They're safe. Children can be safe. I have wonderful fencing. I have handicap ramps. I would love to rent them out and let people use them. I can't do it because I can't get them back for my own family. This is very, very unfair. You're driving the small, good landlord out of Los Angeles. The rental units in Los Angeles are looking terrible because we have no incentive to put money into them. They don't belong to us. And we have no way to redeem them if we want to make them better. If we get bad tenants, we cannot protect our tenants that are in the building. So you're making it so difficult for us that we're the people that really love and care about the city, and I would love to buy more small units. I love fixing them up. It's just, I like doing it, but I can't do it because I have no control over the property.
Thank you. So as John Walsh comes forward, Aaron Green, you are on deck.
I'd like to echo everything Mr. Gross said. To the mom and pop landlords, you understand, you are dinosaurs in the new LA. You will die off and you will go. Huge corporations are taking the city over. Do you understand? That's what it is. And we, unless the mom and pop landlords and the tenants get together, they're going to take the whole city over. Look at the ones with the expensive clothes. Those are the ones who are going to take over. And look at the mom and pop people. They seem to be dressed the same way as the tenants, don't they? Don't they? And I want to say, I've been teaching and working in South Central for a quarter of a century, okay? And let me tell you the big picture. This city is on an edge of another civil disturbance, okay? So you want to push it, it's going to take one little police violent episode, and the city will burn again. And why? Because we're being pushed out. Because you can't get an apartment in this city anymore. You were able to get an apartment for up until the year 2000. We can't move in here anymore. Low-income people cannot move in here. And it's just going to take an inch. And I'm not asking, and I'm telling you, even the gangs have a nickname for me. I have a street name. I'm so well known in South Central, okay? They call me the Professor, okay? But the gang that controls, that's the Lows. I hope you know what the Lows. The ones down south who control the drug dealing in Hollywood call me the Chairman. Because they away from the pack. They all know me. The only ones who don't know me are the Nazi skinheads, the ones who want to kill me. Because the other gangs are businessmen. Their business is narcotics, and they're not going to kill John Walsh because that would hurt business. The Nazi skinheads worship Satan, and they will kill me. And that's why I have it on the tape right there at the last meeting predicting my death. And if I die, I'll be on 60 Minutes. And the letter that Richard Bonin at 60 Minutes will name the people responsible for killing me. So I'm asking you, and just one thing you don't have in South Central are these right-wing Nazi skinheads with the swastikas all over them. Be thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Aaron Green, and on deck is James Litz. Was there Aaron not here?
Aaron yields his time. He's got his names.
Okay. So we'll go straight to James, and Tara Bannister is on deck. How are you, James?
I'm great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Litz, representing the Beverly Hills Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, and I want to thank you for bringing this first step of reducing the cost of homeownership to the city of Los Angeles. It's vital that we encourage owners to live on site. They're the ones that are preserving the affordable housing stock. They're not coming in to tear down to make condos. They're coming in to live in these properties. The realtors are finding it more and more popular for owners to buy duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and at least one of the owners move into them. So, and also in recognition of the cultural and social diversity in Los Angeles and the cost of housing, this ordinance is way too restrictive regarding the ownership interests and the effect it will have on extended families who want to live in the building. I hope that as you move forward with this ordinance, you'll recognize there is a need for flexibility on these two issues, and thank you again for trying to reduce the cost of home ownership overall. We appreciate the action. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara?
Good afternoon. I'm Tara Bannister. I'm Executive Director of the California Apartment Association. I live and work here in Los Angeles. My address is 432 South Curzon Avenue, apartment 6H. I am very interested in the report the LAHD actually delivered on this. Now, the first time I saw it was late on Wednesday and early Thursday. Now, I love to get into the policy details because I figure in general there is some truth out there and there is something that we can come up with that is fair for everybody involved. When an owner wants to move into their building, they are displacing somebody, and that's something to think about. But when the owner has bought something, they expect that they can move in and become a home owner. In our rapidly metropolitanized area, duplexes, threeplexes, and fourplexes are becoming the townhouses that we see in London and elsewhere. We have to assume not everybody's going to be able to afford that single-family residence. And we also see in our multi-generational neighborhoods that, in our multicultural neighborhoods, that multi-generations want to live together. Your grandmother and your mother and your kids live in the same place. And the only place to do that is if you buy 4, 5, 6, 7 units, which also means that very few apartment buildings are bought by one owner or two owners. They're bought by a lot of people. When you're paying $1.5 million for a duplex, you can assume there's probably more than one person that's going to be able to pay for that. So there's some little details and tweaks that we're probably going to have to make on the LAHD recommendations. One of them is on the ownership percentage. And that's one of them. The other one I want to mention very briefly is the resident manager. I represent owners, developers, and resident managers. And the salt of the earth is that resident manager. There's a reason to have a resident manager in a building that's less than 16 units, which is by law, because they're the person that's going to evacuate in a case of a fire. They're the one that's going to call and report crimes. They're going to be the ones that fix the toilets. They're going to be the ones that make the whole building a good place to live. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brett Bachman, or Brett Bachman, and on deck, Quasi Naku.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for your time.
I
My
know
name's Brett Bachman.
I'll have it by the time you get up here. Okay, but I know who you are, but you're next. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. My name is Brett Bachman. I live at 20669 Martinez Street, Woodland Hills. I rise in support of this motion because my brother and I love Los Angeles, and our dream was to buy something here within Los Angeles, which we did. We bought a 6-unit building in Century City, and we took all our money and put it in there, and we're paying the raised assessment value and taxes to the city for that as well. But the problem is now we can't afford to move in. You know, my brother and I, all the money's in the building, and then we can't afford to put more money in the building, and we can't afford to move in. So now we're both living at our parents' house, which makes our parents really, really happy, but, you know, not us so much. But, you know, so I urge you to lower the fees as soon as possible so that as owners we're able to move in. Now, I understand keeping a moratorium or doing something for condo conversions because people do need places to live. But for owners not to be able to move into their own places after they've purchased the building themselves, I think is really unfair. And thank you for your time.
Quasi Nokuma. And next we'll have Brian Paul, I think. So Norkuma?
Nkrumah.
I thought I had it. I apologize.
Well, this is the third year I've come down here to address some issue that impacts on displacement and the housing crisis. I live in Koreatown, and that's an area that's being depopulated by displacement. At first, a lot of developers thought that they were going to make quick money with it. I see a lot of empty buildings in my community, and the one across the street from me that we came down here for with folks last year, which was symbolic of the process going in our community. Half of the people who were displaced are either renting a room from someone, one is living out of his van, and I'm talking about people who work white-collar jobs making halfway decent incomes. You know, Memorial Day, they were talking about how middle-class Americans couldn't go to the park with their kids because of the cost of gasoline and the 6.5% increase on the cost of food and other costs. So they couldn't really celebrate Memorial Day, and we're on the verge of July 4th at the end of this week, and we're going to hear a lot more on television, the newspapers, and the internet on the same issue. And this is the same environment in which people cannot afford to find space. The loss of all this rent-controlled housing has put a squeeze on the entire housing market throughout Los Angeles. Where are people going to go? The steamroller keeps on rolling. I haven't been down here much in the past year because I've been in law school because I want to deal with this on another level. And also because I'm skeptical, frankly, about speaking here very much anymore. But I feel a necessity to do it on behalf of my neighbors. I just had to tell one of the women who I gave some housing to her and her daughter last year when they were evicted from their apartment. They were going to stay for a few weeks. They ended up staying for 4.5 months. This was not someone I had a relationship with. She was simply a neighbor who desperately needed a place to stay. And I had to tell her for the second time this year, I cannot house you again because I'm still trying to help other neighbors. So this thing is very personal to me and it's very practical for a lot of people. And I hope that you all will really consider what the bottom line is for the most hard hit in this situation when you vote on the issue.
Thank you. And after Brian is Janet Elgin.
Okay, I think this is a matter, it's an issue of private property rights. I think that especially for the owner-occupiers that have been in the units ever since they've bought them and they've lived there the whole time, they have to have the ability to live and enjoy their private property. This is America, and I am being patriotic. I think that it's important that we preserve those rights, and I think we have to realize also the effect the economy is going through right now. I have conducted, goodbye Mr. Reyes, I've conducted a number of avoiding foreclosure seminars where we've gone ahead and we've helped people in foreclosure, and we're seeing all of these people come with the 1 to 4 units, and they haven't got the $20,000 to move into their unit, so they're losing the units. And do you know what? The banks don't pay relocation to anybody, Larry Gross included. So we need to look at these, what we've done. We put punitive measures in place which really penalize the people that own or would like to live in their own units and those that already did live in their units. It's crazy. This is America. We need private property rights because when people don't feel confident to invest in real estate, that economic stimulus is lost to the city. And at this time, the economy really can't, in the city of Los Angeles, really can't face that. Thank you.
Thank you. On deck, next we'll have Richard Smith. Good afternoon.
Hi. My name is Janet Elgin. I'm a resident of Los Angeles. I consider this amendment arbitrary, short-sighted, and in the long run harmful to our city as a whole. I see no logic to the idea that if I'm a tenant and someone is going to evict me from my living quarters, that's an extreme loss, and Zion Parks clearly don't understand what a loss it is. On top of that, they're not going to give me the full relocation amounts that the City Council voted in and approved of in April 2007. It's like, just kick a person when they're down. It's completely arbitrary that you would give tenants less money. It doesn't matter why they're being evicted, if it's because of condo demolition and condos conversion and demolition, or because good faith and the owner of the property wants to live in there. My needs as a tenant are the same regardless. I don't believe in reducing relocation amounts for tenants under any circumstances. I'm not averse to the concept of owner-occupied housing, but this one by Zion Parks is extremely arbitrary. It takes tenants' it takes their security net for no reason. It doesn't address the issues of the tenant at all. It doesn't matter why I'm being evicted. I need that money, and which was voted in April 2007. And from personal experience, having been evicted under the Ellis Act and watch what happened to my seniors, neighbors in particular, these people don't just go away. That seems to be the concept with a lot of people. They just go somewhere else. They don't go into affordable housing. I did a lot of calling myself, and I found the wait for affordable housing is 3 to 10 years, or it's so long that they're just not taking names anymore. And amendments like this one by Zion Parks causes people, particularly seniors, to end up out on the streets, sleeping on the streets. And that's a complex issue, but short-sighted, shallow amendments like this contribute to the number of people sleeping on the streets. I hope that enough of you believe in fairness and logic, and you'll kill this, which makes no sense.
Thank you very much. After Mr. Smith, it's K. Michael Key.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Smith, 804 East 6th Street, Los Angeles. On behalf of our membership of the United Coalition East Prevention Project, we are opposed to any reduction in tangible relocation fees to be replaced by rather intangible good faith negotiations on behalf of landlords. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You were too fast, Mr. Smith. You can testify in my committee anytime. After Mr. Key, if we could have Lydia Avila. Go on, sir.
Yeah, Chairman Reyes, Mr. Weston, that be me, K. Michael Key. I'm here as a resident from Central City East, better known as Skid Row. Someone said that common sense generally ain't so common. I think we're fortunate in that the leadership of this committee seems to be given that uncommon common sense. What I do know as a renter, as a tenant, that it took many, many, many years to and extensive public hearings for the current amounts to be passed into law. And then a mere 4 months later, we see this amendment to decrease and to take away the elevated levels. What I have witnessed personally is folks in the hardest hit gentrified part of town being forcibly and often illegally kicked out of their units, and through the help of Barbara Schultz, LA Can, and some of the other downtown organizations, being able to get represented and get relocation money and be unable to find new housing, or being forced to have that small amount dissipated on housing before they came. So I would simply say that, so when we hear the alpha dogs talking about the mom and pop, that's not who they're here to benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Key. So we have Ms. Avila, and then after that, I think it's Leah Simon Weisberg would be on deck. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lydia, and I'm a community organizer with East LA Community Corporation in Boyle Heights, and I'm here to recommend that the higher relocation amounts stay at the current amount that's required, because the tenants that I've worked with, I could easily say 90% that have been facing an eviction were from mom and pop landlords. That one lady, actually, she came to the office and was like, well, I need to get them out because I want to live there, a landlord. And she was very nice. And I told her, well, you know, the tenant is disabled, and you know, you're going to have to pay relocation fees. And immediately she screamed at me through the door and walked out of our office. So all of the evictions with tenants that I've worked with have been evictions where it's stated as owner occupancy, and in one case, 2 disabled seniors. The new landlord had already started getting their mail there to say that they were living there already, to be able to claim owner occupancy, but in reality, they were just putting their address there in order to be able to meet the well, now covered loophole under the report for owner occupancy. So there's some very tragic situations, and people aren't being able to relocate within the neighborhood. The people are leaving to other places, incurring additional transportation costs, childcare costs, because in other neighborhoods, those things that are affordable in Boyle Heights are no longer affordable to the families that are working families and working class. So I'm here to urge you to get higher relocation fees, maintain the old ones, because it's not just the impact of the actual move and the new rents, but also the network that they're losing and the services that come with the neighborhood that you've lived in for 10, 20, 25 years, especially for seniors in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Weisberg, and then Bob Dano was on deck.
Good afternoon. Leah Simon Weisberg. I'm an attorney with the Eviction Defense Network located in the Pico Union area, but we service tenants throughout the county. I'm in court 3 to 4 times a week and am actively litigating the owner moving cases. I think that it's very important to remember that when people are purchasing properties, people often take out $100,000 for mortgages, to fix their kitchen. So I think easily people can build into to build into the mortgage the amount of money they would need if they're authentically, truly going to be living on the property. I've seen properties where there's 17 units and somebody suddenly owns 3% of the property, so their college graduating daughter can move into a Silver Lake fantastic apartment where a family's lived there for 30 years and suddenly they're out. The thing that's also concerning is you only have to live there 6 months. So this college grad can live there for 6 months and then move, and that family doesn't have a right of return. So I think it's also really important that it doesn't take that much to even do an owner occupancy. So I think that's another piece where to be narrowing kind of these loopholes that exist. Also, just in terms of issues I think it's really important that we maintain the relocation amounts. These are real amounts that tenants really need, and I don't think that, particularly from what the council has heard in terms of people's testimony, none of these people are being actually prevented. They're making choices to leave apartments empty, which doesn't make sense economically. Again, they need to be making good economic business choices when they're buying properties and building these costs into their mortgages and not expecting poor people to somehow come up with those costs instead. So again, we really support that. I really hope that you do not lower the amounts for owner occupants.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dano, and then on deck is Crystal Martinez. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Daigneault, and I live at 1327 Neola Street in Eagle Rock. Councilmember Huizar, I live in your district. In 2002, I became a first-time homeowner when I purchased 2 houses on one lot, which was under rent control. Waiting for LAHD approval to serve a 60-day notice, I made 3 mortgage payments totaling $7,500, plus 3 rental payments for my place to live totaling $6,000. I paid a total of $13,900 while waiting for approval to move into the house that I just bought. Once approved, I gave this 60-day notice, paid the old relocation fee of $3,000. During those 60 days, I paid 2 mortgage payments, again, totaling $5,000, and then an additional 2 rental payments, totaling $4,000. I paid a total of $9,000 while waiting for the tenant to leave so that I can actually get into my own house. So to move into my own house, because of the time delay and relocation fees, it cost $25,900 after my down payment of 10%, which was $30,000. So it's wiped out my entire savings, everything, just to get into my own home. And now this is also my retirement as well. If anything, we need to reduce the time that it takes for the LAHD to actually file all this paperwork and get this through faster. Because obviously, the more time that we waste just filing the paperwork, not including the 60 days, is money out of my pocket just trying to purchase a first-time homeowner. Thank you.
No, thank you. So after Miss Martinez, we have Deborah Burton.
Hi, my name is Cristal Martinez. I am the daughter of Tomasa and Jaime Martinez. Both my mother and father worked extremely hard to purchase their home and give my siblings and me a better future. My father worked 3 jobs to provide for us. He held a day and a night job as a janitor and a weekend job as a barber. My mother cleaned homes. Since my father's passing, I have stepped up to help my mom manage the apartments. My mother is a zealous Christian and oversees their apartments as such. She truly believes that an individual's word or handshake mean more than any document. Her rents are low. She allows her tenants to pay when they can and to make payments throughout the month. Nor does she charge any late fees, all because times are tough. It is rather annoying for me to see how her tenants treat her, especially because she never tolerated such behavior from me. Despite owning a couple of units, she is really not a businesswoman. It seems to me that she does not understand that this is in fact a business. This is her livelihood. If she doesn't get paid on time, then she is unable to pay her bills on time, and who gives her a break? She attests it is her strong faith in God that protects her. My parents' apartments are a small mom-and-pop business. My mother speaks broken English and informs her tenants of any repairs or increases verbally. She is by no means Donald Trump or an NBA player. So when she became aware of the cost of good faith relocation fees, she was completely shocked. She asked how good faith relocation fee could be so much. After all, it is in good faith. So I stand here before you on behalf of my mother and my recently divorced sister who needs a place for herself and my nephew, and ask that you reconsider the extremely high cost of good faith relocation fees for owner family occupancy. Please reduce them to original amounts. There are many families who've been waiting for this day to finally come. Please do not disappoint them.
Thank you. After Miss Burton, I believe it's Joseph Thomas. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Deborah Burton. I'm a member of LA CAN. I'm also a downtown resident. I pay rent. Many people in the city of Los Angeles pay rent. You're talking about reducing relocation fee. You talk about helping the people who own small properties. You're asking them to give them the opportunity to move their family members in. What about the resident who is in that unit? You want to dislocate them and pay them less relocation fee. I work in a downtown community. Many people who live in the downtown community are displaced residents from other communities. We have a homeless crisis and we have a housing crisis. The reduction that you pay them for relocation fee is going to devastate them just as it would any other person that owns property. We need to get the full amount that is due to us. All we ask for you is to be fair for the residents who live in residential units. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Good evening. My name is Joseph Thomas. I'm also a member of the Los Angeles Community Action Network, and I'm also a resident of this downtown community. I oppose this simply because, one, we as tenants should not be victimized because under no fault of ours that we can go down here and we are beating our head up against the wall on the market rate. We are beating our head up against corporations. We are beating our heads up against condominiums. But by the same time, for the last 45 years, we have spearheaded, and you know that, about the moratorium we put down here on the conversions. And for us to go through all that, and then we turn around and we're torn down of what we actually did, what we actually fought for. And by the same time, nobody in this place, except those that are higher up, would even make a minimum of $135K annually. So if you give us a reduction, the only thing you're doing is sweltering the pot of homelessness once again because there would be nowhere to go. We don't have finances. 80% of the people down here are fixed income. As the market rate goes up, we stay the same with $221,900 at the tops. That's it. So I ask to have a reconsideration of this idea because homelessness is a right. It is not a privilege. And the only way I see this privilege going is to the landlords and stuff. And I hate to see favoritism going that way because we ourselves are not asked to be victimized anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, under normal circumstances, Mr. Noel Weiss would be the next speaker. I said under normal circumstances. But I just received an opinion from our city attorney, and she indicated that I could refuse or not afford you the opportunity to speak unless you find out what NBA player that Larry Gross was talking about. Noel Weiss is next, and Veronica Becker.
No.
I think that was intended for Veronica Herb, not me. You may have been misadvised. Wouldn't be the first time. I have an idea for you. We got rich versus poor here, or middle class versus poor. We got to close the gap. Oil hit $140 plus a barrel. A year ago, what was it, 60, 70? Is it that unreasonable for the council to enact a 1% oil severance tax, take the money, put it into a fund, and supplement to the extent necessary so that these people, you can hopefully bridge the gap, give the people the relocation fees, and at the same time, try to make it a little bit easier, perhaps, on these legitimate mom and pops. Second idea would be documentary transfer tax. People, $2 million, $3 million houses, you think an extra 0.5% extra documentary transfer tax, putting it into the same fund? I think if somebody's buying a $2 million plus house, they can afford the little extra. And you know what? Take that money, put it aside, try to supplement. And in the meantime, you'll be able to monitor this situation, and hopefully through that mechanism at least try to close the gap. And again, I just want to push the idea, we really need a debate on housing policy, gentlemen. We really do. And it's been far too long. We need to have it. And if you fail again to do it, we're just going to have these continued problems where you're pitting rich against poor or middle class against poor. It's just not right. Thank you.
Thank you. No, Ms. Becker.
Good afternoon, council members. Veronica Perez-Becker from the Central City Association. We support the measure before you. We see this as a balancing of the interests. Of course, tenants have rights and should be protected, especially the most vulnerable ones. But property owners have rights too, especially the property owners who want to participate in home ownership and live in their own buildings. What we're talking about here is striking a balance between those interests. We're not talking about taking away tenant relocation fees. We're talking about still awarding the most vulnerable over $11,000, almost $11,000 in tenant relocation fees, which is still a significant increase from what tenants were getting a year ago. So we see this, at least that's my reading. Am I wrong in what they could get? So we see this as striking a balance of the interests. You have more than one constituency here, and we hope that you will support this, which is a good balance. It protects tenants, it protects property owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, Mr. Chair, there are no more cards from the public. It would be my recommendation that this item be held in committee for a minimum of 30 days so that we can discuss the concerns or some of the concerns that were brought up by both sides to see if we can bring this closer to some consensus. With that said, I don't see a need where it relates to this item to bring up the housing department to give us a report on it. So I would just, without objection, suggest that with your okay.
Yes, I think that would be a strategic move, and for the sake of time, move in that direction.
Okay, if we could read item 4.
Yes, Councilman. Item 4 is a city attorney prepare ordinance. It has to do with mobile home parks and those homes being subject to the RSO protections.
Okay, I can say that on item 4 there are no cards from the public, so you may want to speak quickly.
Will do. Good afternoon, Judith Reel, Deputy City Attorney. As instructed, we've presented a draft ordinance. Part of it is to increase the tenant relocation payments to mirror those required by the RSO. We do recommend a motion, however. If you look at page 3, section 3, there's a subdivision 4 there, and it refers to the relocation amounts that were owed as of yesterday. As of today, the relocation amounts have increased, and we recommend that the ordinance be amended to reflect the relocation amounts that are required as of today. And this also gives prospective tenants a right to a short-term lease subject to rent control.
Okay, with that said, Mr. Weiss moves, and if we would just incorporate the, are there any other questions? And like I said, we will move forward with this, add in the amendments from the city attorney, and Mr. Chairman, without objection, then we'll draft the ordinance and forward it to council.
That'd be
My
great.
service is done.
Actually, we do have one more item on housing. Yeah, sorry about that, crept up on us. We do have 2 cards on item number 5.
I've got to go catch Larry Gross and find out who it is.
So, Roberto, can you read number 5?
We got it down to 3. That's what Weiss. Spaghetti,
Jerry
Okay, so
Bird.
you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 is a plum item, so that does conclude the housing portion of the committee.
There is one public comment card. I don't know if it's for the Housing Committee or for Plum Committee. There's a general public comment card.
All right, for number 5, you talking about number 5?
No, actually, is it on number 5?
It's
It's
for
in the box.
planning.
Okay, thank you very much.
So general public comment for housing? Okay, so who's here for public comment on number 5, on housing?
You know, the word affordable, the Cheshire Cat said in Alice in Wonderland, a word means exactly what I choose it to mean, nothing more and nothing less. I pay $700, $750. I've been in the same unit since '76. That's below any of your levels. It's below very, very low. When the, people see affordable, they think of $500, $600, $700. They don't think of $1,000, $2,000, and most people. I'd just like to ask for 2 things. We've had, people got up here and said duplexes are being built. I don't think duplexes and quadruplexes are being built in this city anymore. How many are being built in this city? And also I heard foreclosures. How many foreclosures in the last year where units were taken off the market? These are things you have in your database. And I asked to find out the answers to those 2 questions.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You can
Walsh.
afford it.
And that, those requests are being made of the department in different types of reports, so we should be getting that information. Okay, Roberto, number 5.
Yes,
Thank you, colleagues from the Housing Committee. Appreciate your support.
Just on number 5, if we can make sure, I just spoke briefly with the general manager, but on this, you know, I too want to get the data of how many affordable units there are, but I also, as you are leading and myself, kind of entitlement reform to streamline, that doesn't become another burden and another step. So it's as long as we can make sure that concern is heard by the housing department, we'll work with them to do that.
Right, to be able to collapse the process. Yes, absolutely. That's right. Okay, thank you so much, Councilman Garcetti. So this now begins the plum portion of the committee. And Roberto, item number 5.
Yes, Councilman. Item 5 is a HCED committee report. It has to do with the tracking of affordable units in the city of LA and creating a permanent database.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Suzette Flynn. I'm with the LA City Housing Department. And this item has somewhat of a long history. The motion was initially introduced back in fall of 2006. And there's been several report backs, and I reported to the Plum Committee in February of this year. And I just wanted to briefly go over the tracking system. We did talk about it before, but the Housing Department currently does have a permanent database for affordable housing. That is being improved upon at this moment, and we are creating something that is called the Citywide Housing Production System, or CHIPS, which will include, actually the model will be done by August this year, and we hope to have it running by 2008. It will track all affordable housing built with affordable financing sources. It'll incorporate the existing database that we have. It'll track things like tax credit, CDBG, home, all the different sources. It'll track housing built by the CRA, HACLA, the county, LASA, and it'll track restrictions and land use covenants, so density bonus, Mellow Act, those things. It will also track expiration dates. It'll produce reports that they can then give to council that will cover supervisor districts, CD, all sorts of things like that. So it's going to be very comprehensive, and most important, it will also include all market rate housing that has been built since 2001, April of 2001. So you'll get a much more comprehensive view of the housing that exists. So a couple of questions have come up with respect to RSO. the Housing Department has a separate database for rent-stabilized housing, so you won't see it necessarily in this, but we do have a separate database of all the rent-stabilized housing. One of the things that we wanted to talk about here, and it has been brought up, and it's gone back and forth, which is why this report has gone back and forth, is a sign-off by the Housing Department on certificate of occupancy for affordable units. And right now, one of the problems sometimes that comes up is because the Housing Department doesn't see that last C of O, it is actually possible that a C of O could be issued without us knowing it if there were affordable housing requirements, and that affordable housing may not have been provided. So this was an issue that was brought up in the initial motion. So what we would like to propose is that the city attorney be instructed to draft an ordinance amending the municipal code, section 91.109.3, issuance of certificates, to require that prior to the issuance of a C of O that LHD, the Housing Department, must verify or sign off that all affordable housing requirements have been met or in lieu fees. And this would ensure that affordable housing units have been built or set aside and that in lieu fees have been paid, and that a covenant has been recorded with the county assessor's office. So that's something that we have discussed with the Department of Building and Safety and Planning, and they think that this is also a good idea.
Madam Attorney.
Jerry Burge, City Attorney's Office. We advised you at the last meeting, and I think perhaps even more than that, that we believe that that ordinance would violate state law, and we've advised housing this as well. State law mandates the city to issue a certificate of occupancy when the building is safe to occupy. Whether or not there are affordable units or it meets affordable unit requirements has nothing to do with whether or not the building is safe to occupy. So we do not believe that is a legitimate basis for amending the code related to certificates of occupancy. Now, there could be some administrative process if housing and building and safety want to work together so that building and safety can certainly tell housing that a certificate of occupancy is going to be issued and housing can provide information. That's one thing, but we cannot withhold a certificate of occupancy based on this sign-off, and we shouldn't amend the code to suggest otherwise.
Okay, now, are you suggesting we withhold the C of O?
Until the affordable housing has been created or they've set it aside like they're required to do, or in lieu fees have been paid. And we did discuss this with the Department of Building and Safety, and they basically said that unless the the LA Municipal Code is amended to include the Housing Department, that there is really nothing that they can do.
Okay.
It has to be statutory allowance to sign off.
What I'd like to do, if my colleagues are okay, is on that whole dynamic of how we are able to identify for the database the existence of affordable housing, or to get that profile, maybe there's a way to get to that information without withholding the C of O, if that is illegal. Because that's the advice we're hearing from our city attorney, correct? So
we did actually look into some other cities, and I know, for instance, Santa Monica, they will not, most of their housing, they said the developers pay in lieu fees, and they will not issue a C of O unless that has happened. And that does go before their housing department.
Well, maybe we should, on that piece of this report, if we could have a healthy discussion in my office, not here at this point, but come back with some evidence and examples and see where we could take this. But perhaps we can do that in my office and continue that piece of your recommendation. But I'd like to get to a place in which we could have a stronger role in understanding what is happening in our city and how do we promote the best policies for all of our constituents. So I appreciate your hard work.
Okay.
And I think we have a healthy tension here, so
Thank you.
it's okay. All right, thank you much. We do have one speaker card, Ms. Whitney Blumenfeld. What district?
Good morning, good afternoon, council members. Whitney Blumenfeld for Councilman Bill Rosendahl. I do want to thank Suzette and everyone else in the Housing Department for working on this motion. We would like to see if the C of O is not the process that we can hold up, if it earlier in the process somehow that there can be a tracking, whereby on the list that they were referring to that the complex shows up on this list, and something else is held off earlier in the process, because currently, as Suzette knows, we're having a problem tracking some units and some MEL units and what's being provided, and it's definitely a longer process than we would like it to be. So thank you very much, and further conversation is definitely needed.
Thank you, Ms. Blumenfeld. Okay, so we could like to instruct the Housing Department together with the City Attorney's Office, so we can go over that element and have that discussion in hopes that we can have the citywide housing production system model ready for in the next couple of months. Okay? Okay, Roberto, next item.
Yes, Councilman. The next item, I believe it's item 10. I think you have a speaker card. This has to do with a nomination of 721 Amoroso Place as a historic cultural monument.
Okay, can we have the staff give us a quick summary on this before we have the speakers come up?
Good afternoon, council members. This is case number CHC 2008-881-HCM at 721 East Amoroso Place. The recommendation from the Cultural Heritage Commission is to declare the property a historic cultural monument. This is a distinguished example of craftsman-style residential architecture and is located in the Venice area. So there is no objection to this moving forward.
Okay. Ms. Blumenfeld would like to speak last, or would you like to speak first?
It doesn't matter, so I'll speak since I'm here. Whitney Blumenfeld for the council office. The speaker is going to come and ask for a different name designation. The council office is fine with that, has no problems. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fisher and then Mr. Saylor.
Yes. Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes, Councilman Huizar, Councilman Weiss. The reason we're here, and the only reason we're here, is because of the name of this one. This is a nomination that I prepared for Mark Saylor here, the owner of the property, several months ago. And I prepared it when we chose the name of the second owner of the property. The original owner of the property was a contractor who built the house and then sold it immediately. So we went and used the name of the second owner, who had it for several years, and used it as a weekend retreat, which was very typical of the early Venice housing. We're asking that the name Sturdivant Bungalow be put back on, which is on the original application.
I think you're hearing the council say yes from the district, and I don't see any objections from my colleagues, so that will be the action of this committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, anything else, Roberto?
Yes, Councilman, I believe item 11, it has to do with was it a consent, Councilman?
It was consent.
Okay, then it would be 12, Councilman. It's an appeal by Ms. Ginsburg. She's appealing the action of the South Valley APC relative to a zone change, and it has to do with the construction of 4 apartment units.
Okay. Please.
Hi. Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Frank Kwan with the Los Angeles City Planning Department. I was a hearing officer representing this case. This is an APC case that went through the South Valley Area Planning Commission. It was denied at the time. It went to commission, and basically the appeal before you is by the applicant, excuse me, the original applicant, who is contesting the commission's decision to deny the zone change and building line request, building line removal request for the 20-foot building line. The original request was to have a zone change to the from the R1 to the RD 1.5 for a project that includes 4 units with the existing unit for a total of 5. Excuse me. The applicant has now come back and has worked with the staff, and he is appealing the case, obviously, but he's coming back in with revised plans that show a total of 4 units, and 3 of them will be the new units, along with the 1 existing single-family dwelling. I think the council office, I'm not sure if they're here yet, but, oh, sorry.
Yes.
I think may have some commentary on it, and I think I'll step aside for any questions to that effect.
Thank you, sir. Let's call up the appellant and share the nature of the appeal. I believe it's Scott Ginsburg and Selwyn Ginsburg.
Yes, my name is Scott Ginsburg. I'm here on behalf of my father, Selwyn Ginsburg. He's here if for some reason you have a question for him, but he just thought I should speak on his behalf.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Kwan pretty much covered the project that was denied. We had already basically changed it when it got its denial, and my father was unable to attend that meeting. I forget the exact name of it. So he would have explained that we've already scaled back the project from addition of 4 units. Now we only intend to add 3. We've done our plot plan. It's a lot different. We work with the councilman's office and with Mr. Kwan. We've totally revamped it. We have a common area now designated. We've the parking is now better seen on the plan. Security, things like trash has been addressed, waste and stuff like that. So we think it's a lot better project.
Okay, thank you. We do have 2 cards, Jeff and Jan Withrow. Would like to come on up, please. And then we'll have Ms. Winger.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name's Jeff Witherall. I live at 17605 Anadia Way.
Well, I must first say thank you for your patience.
Okay.
You learned a lot this
Yeah, we were
afternoon,
here
didn't you?
last time too, so a couple weeks ago. Anyway, my residence is south of this project. There's an alley between the property that he wants to add on to is going to go right out in the alley. With this increased density here put in here, it's going to create added traffic in an already congested area. There's commercial buildings down the alley on White Oak. There's Wendy's Drive. There's a commercial building next to his property. There's no access. There's only an alley access. There's a street on Caldas. Nadia Way, we're just 1 block south of Sherman Way, and there's no access out into Sherman Way. All of these people that work at these different retail shops, commercial buildings, they have to go, they spill out and they park on Caldas, on Sherman Way, on Nadia Way. It's just creating, and we want to keep this as a residential area. There are no apartment units in the area. In fact, they just built 5 new homes, one a half a mile down on Sherman Way to keep the area that way. Any additional ones? I got time. Also, that the loss of privacy from the second-story windows and balconies, be looking over and peering into the R1 residence. And additionally, you're going to have much with apartments, more transient people in the vicinity. You're going to create more crime. There's kids that come out in these alley in this area here, and they have the parking right on the alley. The traffic is just going to be unbearable that we already have. I hope you will strongly consider South Valley Area Planning Commission and also the Van Nuys, which is now Lake Balboa Neighborhood Council's recommendation to disapprove this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. John Withrow. Still want to speak? Yes. Hi.
Except for you to see it, I make it bigger.
Okay.
This
Thank
is
you.
my area and my house. My name is Jan Withrow, and I live at 17605 Inadia. The first group of items are showing.
Can you bring the microphone closer to you? There you go.
On my storyboard, the first group of items are showing single-family, one-story homes. with already congestions on Sherman Way, noting that there is a red curb in front of the property in question, the 17610 Sherman Way property, and it's unusable to park anybody in front of that house. The number 2 item is showing the red curb in front of the property. The group 3 is viewing the back of the property, which is butts up into our alley. It's showing that they're using it for business. There was a towing business at one time, and they just use this property for rental, and they don't take care of this property. The parking congestion also is a problematic from White Oak on Sherman Way, White Oak to Caldas, and it spills on to Caldas and Ignatia, where I'm currently living. Existing very narrow alley, so with all of these trash cans that really I don't really see in his outline how he's going to have enough room for all the trash, recyclables, and yard cutting trash.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope a picture's worth 1,000 words.
And you got quite a few of them, too. Okay. Ms. Winger?
Thank you very much. Phyllis Winger, representing Councilman Greg Smith, Council District 12. We actually support the proposal as recommended for approval in the original staff report. However, we do want to include the revised plot plan that was submitted May 27th that shows the changes to the structure and the proposed buildings. We would further like to add 2 other conditions to the proposal. We would like to request that all the materials and colors used in the new development be consistent throughout the whole thing, and that includes whatever is done to the existing house so that it is one uniform, consistent design. And then we would also request that the applicant submit a revised plot plan, floor plan, elevation, and a color material board to the council office for review for this consistency as he proceeds throughout. We thank you for your time and appreciate it. Thank you. I will submit this to the clerk to be included in the file.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Thank you for that overview. So we can grant in part, deny in part, with all the necessary language and conditions as submitted by the council office. And that would be the action of this committee?
And findings too is by the Director of Planning. As provided by Director of Planning.
Okay. That's been seconded. That will be the action of this committee. Okay, I think we only have public comment left, right, Roberto?
Yes, Council.
Okay, John Walsh?
I won't take the full 2 minutes. You and Herb Wesson get an A+, and I'm a tough grader on how you run the meeting. I'm just curious, is this on council phone now?
I believe so.
Okay, I have if you're listening to this on council phone, I'm wondering how many people listen to it. Call me at 323-469-4178. 469-4178. Just leave a message, say you listen to it. I hope that I get 120, 150 calls on my message machine, which would mean that somebody out there actually knows about council phone. 323-469-4178. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, let me make sure. Is this on? Can we get to Madam Clerk? Can we get?
Yeah, it is on council phone, and also it's on the internet.
Okay.
So they can
subscribe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.